Nancy Cordes for us on the South Lawn of the White House. Nancy, thank you very much. Let's bring in senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe, who is in Delaware, not far from the president's beach house. Ed, you know, we just saw that the young people on the South Lawn, maybe the phones lifted a little higher, maybe the cheers a little louder. Democrats definitely wanted to excite young voters with this switch on the ticket, or attempted switch on the ticket. What do we know about this move now of the vice president heading to Delaware, where you are?
Yeah, that was a fortuitous backdrop for her at a time when the party's eager to win back college-age voters. There she was with some college students herself. At this hour, Tony, she's got roughly a third of the 1,900 or so delegates that are going to be required to secure the Democratic nomination. And that's because a handful of states, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, New Hampshire, and we anticipate Florida by the end of this morning, are all saying that they plan to vote for her when the convention is held, whenever a roll call vote is held among the states. So she's on her way to getting what she needs. And in addition to the Michigan Governor, Gretchen Whitmer, staying with the campaign as a co-chair, we heard, for example, from the Illinois Governor, J.B. Pritzker, this morning, who had been a holdout, who was seen as someone who might be interested in running were there to be a more competitive race, and someone who's very close to some of the party's biggest donors. But he, too, now says he's with her at this point. So that trip to Wilmington is designed to buck up the troops, probably have a few high-level meetings with senior staffers about what exactly to anticipate in the coming days, and start the process of thinking about a running mate. As for the president, he's expected to get his daily security briefing here at his Rehoboth Beach home. We have not seen him since Wednesday when he arrived here with his COVID-19 diagnosis. The doctors have said he is improving. There is a possibility that he might at some point try to venture out if he's feeling healthier. It is a windier and overcast day here on the beach, but for now, we wait to hear from the president, who has said he plans to address the nation later this week. Tony?
Yeah, we do. And Ed, as you note, those governors coming forward endorsing Kamala Harris, that reduces the likelihood of some sort of a mini primary, as some people had been hoping for, calling for, but it does not knock them out of the potential running as a VP candidate. We'll find out if they're interested as well in the days ahead. Ed, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news, and tonight on the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm Tony DeCopel in New York.
Welcome back. I'm Lana Zach. We continue to follow all the latest happenings out of Washington and across the country as the race for the presidency has taken another interesting turn. We just heard Vice President Kamala Harris providing her first public remarks since becoming a presidential candidate herself, following President Biden's decision and announcement yesterday that he would not seek any further the Democratic nomination for president. We are joined now by Aaron Navarro. He is there in Delaware as the president is still recovering from COVID, and the vice president is heading there later today. What stood out the most to you from those remarks, Aaron?
I think this quote about Beau Biden, as I mentioned earlier, that is the late son of President Biden, also an attorney general at the same time. Vice President Harris was attorney general in California. Near the top of her remarks today at the White House, Harris said, quote, "The qualities that Beau revered in his father are the same qualities that I have seen every day in our president. In his honesty, his integrity, his commitment to faith and family, and deep love of our country." It's again showing respect to President Biden and also defending President Biden amid a lot of criticisms from mainly Republicans on Capitol Hill, saying that if he can't be a candidate, he should step down and resign. You see Harris, who throughout this whole month has backed up President Biden as he was fielding so many calls to step down, and she continued to do that in her remarks today.
So many calls for him to step down. We understand that that fundraising had started to dry up, that the polls were showing that, particularly on the state-by-state level, when you looked at those swing states, that the numbers did not look good for the Biden-Harris campaign. At this point, it looks like the vice president is the only person who is seeking the Democratic nomination. How significant is it that no other major bold-faced names have come forward?
Well, you could really tell that's where things were heading when you saw Governor Whitmer, Shapiro, Pritzker, Newsom. Really, in the 24 hours since all of this has started, come to Harris's side. These are people that maybe could have gone in, especially Pritzker with a lot of money, could have caused and stirred the pot a little by trying to call up some delegates. They said, no, we are backing Vice President Harris. And with just a week until potentially this roll call vote, it seems unlikely that a challenger would pop up and also get the support from enough delegates. I believe it's at least 300, maybe a little bit more, that they need to get on that virtual roll call ballot. So it really seems like it's Harris's nomination locked up, and the next couple of weeks is more of a formality as she looks at the vice president pick and as we go into the convention in Chicago.
And Aaron, part of the reason why the vice president is heading to Delaware is to meet with campaign staffers. Do they all automatically switch over to her at this point? What are you hearing now, less than 24 hours, really, from the president's announcement?
Yeah, all indications are that essentially the infrastructure for President Biden and his campaign that has existed in the past year and a half will transfer over to Harris. They switched the names on the FEC filing. She was already on the ticket, so any legal snafus she has avoided because she was already on the ticket. She can just kind of inherit this infrastructure. But we know Vice President Harris, of course, has her own staff. We'll find out if they will be added, if there will be shifts in leadership, and we'll know more after her meeting with the campaign brass here in Wilmington and the headquarters later today.
And Aaron, President Biden still recovering from COVID. We understand from his doctors that he is doing well at this point. Do we expect that the vice president and the president will meet face to face?
At this point, it is unclear. Due to self-isolation, he is at his home in Rehoboth Beach in Delaware. We know that there was a lid, so we don't expect to see President Biden, at least in front of cameras, later today. But we do know that multiple governors yesterday talked to both Biden and Harris. We know that Maryland Governor Wes Moore, who has endorsed Harris, said that he talked to President Biden and Vice President Harris about the race. So we know that Biden is at least making calls. His doctors say that he is in good condition relatively for a COVID diagnosis. But no, we don't expect to see them meet in person later today, but things could change.
Things have changed in the past. That certainly is the case. Aaron Navarro, appreciate you joining us. Well, thank you so much for joining us here on CBS News. I'm Lana Zach, and we are covering all of the very latest as Vice President Harris is in Washington, D.C. today. She just made her first public appearance since President Biden announced that he is ending his re-election campaign. And the vice president, the projected frontrunner for the Democratic nomination, she welcomed the NCAA college men's and women's championship teams to the White House today. She also welcomed, it seems like, multiple other college teams and really took a moment at the top of it before getting into the importance of college athletics to discuss President Biden's legacy.
Joe Biden's legacy of accomplishment over the past 3 years is unmatched in modern history. In one term, he has already, yes, you may clap. In one term, he has already surpassed the legacy of most presidents who have served 2 terms in office.
And the ACLU Democratic PAC received nearly $50 million in donations in less than 24 hours since Vice President Harris announced her campaign. She's also received substantial support from members of her party. At least 36 Senate Dems say they will endorse Harris ahead of next month's Democratic National Convention. And in the House, the vice president has received endorsements from 150 of the party's 212 members. So far, no major names have even come forward to challenge Harris for the nomination. One of those names includes independent Senator Joe Manchin, who says he will not be endorsing the vice president's bid for office. The longtime Democrat was reportedly considering returning to the party. You'll recall that he left the Democratic Party and became an independent as he was being encouraged by some to consider a presidential bid. He joined CBS Mornings earlier today and really shut down any talk, though, that he would be throwing his hat in the ring for president.
I am not running for office. I could not believe that there was not going to be a primary process or a mini process. Other countries do it. I'm not looking for I don't need that as far as in my life, the attention that people think that when you speak up, you're just looking for attention. Okay. Why is everyone afraid to speak out? Why are they afraid to say the system is wrong?
All right, Ed O'Keefe is in Wilmington, Delaware, covering all of this for us. Ed, it has been a tremendous couple of weeks, but especially just in the last 24 hours, this has been a lot happening. So excited to have you break this down for us. You mentioned that this was a fortuitous backdrop, not just because the balcony of the South Portico was behind her there as she was making her first public speech. But are you surprised that it was actually so short when she was talking about the bigger issue, that more of her remarks seemed to be focused on the original intent, which was to celebrate college athletics? What stood out to you?
No, I think it makes sense that she would say something quickly at the top about the elephant in the room or the donkey in the yard, depending on which analogy you'd like to use today. And she decided to move on with the official event. We know that she's headed to Wilmington, as you were talking about with Aaron a little while ago, to meet the troops and probably have some higher level meetings with the most senior advisors to get a sense of what to expect next. We have to see at some point, maybe later today, what the advertising is going to look like for this campaign. What, if any, other tweaks to the general message there might be? And then the big decision she has to make in the coming days is who, if anyone, does she want to select now as her running mate? And how is that vetting of those potential running mates going? And how arduous will that be? What kind of an interview process might unfold? All of that remains to be seen. At this hour, she's got about a third of the delegates needed committed to her already, thanks to delegates from North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, New Hampshire, Florida, and a handful of other states expected later today to say that when it comes to whenever a roll call is held, they intend to vote en masse for the vice president. So you've got to get about roughly 1,900 plus of the roughly 4,000 delegates or so. And based on what's transpired in the last 18 hours or so, she's on her way to doing that. So we'll get a better sense throughout the day of how that campaign is adjusting and preparing. But the paperwork's been changed, the logo has been changed, and ultimately the message and the focus will be tweaked as she takes control of the campaign.
Ed, as you were talking about the potential running mate that Harris is considering, do we know anything more from your sources about when Democrats want to announce that, or anything more about the timing?
Well, I think there's two things they've got to consider. One, is there anyone else, and there doesn't appear to be, who wants to consider challenging her in some way, even though the rules are essentially such that it would be a gargantuan hill to climb, both financially and politically. So once that's cleared, she probably can start to have the conversation about who exactly that running mate would be. I think there are those that are going to say, give it a few days to see how she's doing, to get a sense of maybe an initial internal or external polling, what it is the campaign is now missing. The general consensus appears to be it should be a man. There are those who say ideally it would be from somewhere like the Midwest or the South, where there are a handful of competitive battleground states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Arizona, Nevada, and now probably New Mexico in the Southwest. So is there someone that maybe speaks to those geographic areas? There are Senate and House candidates across the country who are probably more eager to campaign alongside or know that at the top of the ticket there's a more moderate Democrat or someone who's perceived as such involved. And then there's the question of what kind of professional experience does this person need? If she's a former attorney general and senator who has served as vice president for the last 3 years, what other component is needed in that other person to potentially assuage the concerns of Democratic voters and voters overall that the ticket, if elected, would be able to serve the country?
And Ed, one quick question before we let you go. President Biden has been off the campaign trail following that COVID diagnosis. Do we expect that when he is fully recovered, he will join Harris out on that campaign trail as he has endorsed her? Or are Democrats thinking she needs to step into the spotlight and it's better to not have him necessarily by her side?
He has signaled that he will campaign in some form, in some way in the future. What that looks like is unclear at this hour, but he will be involved publicly and otherwise, there's no doubt. We just did get word before we spoke with you, Lana, that there is a lid for the day, as they call it in White House parlance, meaning We won't see the president publicly, or at least we aren't currently expected to. That's consistent with the last several days. He's been here since Wednesday night recovering from COVID-19. His doctor's note on Sunday suggested he's improved significantly and is able to carry out his presidential duties. He was expected to get his daily security briefing this morning, and we'll wait and see if there are any other statements, photos, or announcements to come from the official White House team as to what he's up to throughout the day here in Rehoboth Beach. Lana?
All right, Ed, thank you. Dozens of lawmakers are praising President Biden for his service and his decision to step aside. Many have followed his lead and have endorsed Vice President Harris for the top of the Democratic ticket. I want to bring in now Nicole Killian for more reaction from Capitol Hill. So, Nicole, talk to us about the significance of these endorsements from lawmakers.
Well, the vice president has really wrapped up quite a number of endorsements, dozens really, from members of Congress, both in the House and Senate, which speaks to some of the work that she's been doing over the last 24 hours or so. We know she spent the bulk of yesterday making a lot of calls to well over 100 elected officials, including members of Congress. And that includes people like Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries, leader Chuck Schumer, as well as the heads of the Tri-Caucus, Congressional Black Caucus, Hispanic Caucus, and CAPAC, which represents Asian American lawmakers, as well as some of the other major caucuses in the House. So obviously the vice president knows a lot of these lawmakers well, having served in the Senate herself, but certainly wanted to make the outreach to try to shore up support. One thing that is notable, though, is we have not seen a formal endorsement yet by any of the congressional leaders, whether that is Leader Jeffries, Leader Schumer, or Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, I was just going to note for our viewers that as you were discussing the endorsements, we were seeing Hakeem Jeffries, we were seeing Chuck Schumer, and they have not at this point formally endorsed Harris. I believe that that's also true of former President Obama, as well as Speaker Emeritus Pelosi. What's going on in terms of their strategy to not provide an endorsement at this point?
Well, I think there's a recognition among Democrats and Democratic leaders to a certain extent. I mean, in terms of yesterday, certainly that was a monumental decision and a very difficult decision that the president had to make. So in terms of, for instance, Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, I think some of the thinking from what I've been told is that, look, this was a very emotional day, an emotional decision. And so part of this is about giving the president a little bit of space and also recognizing him and the decision that he made. But the other part of this is that obviously some Democrats have made clear they don't want this process to be a coronation, that they do want an open and transparent process. The vice president herself has acknowledged that, saying that she intends to earn and win this nomination. So some of the reserve may be to just kind of, as we saw in the process of the debate over President Biden, really kind of letting members and delegates, if you will, dictate the process going forward.
All right, Nicole, thank you. Well, former President Donald Trump told CBS News that President Biden's decision to step aside was a, quote, shock. In response to the president endorsing his VP, Trump said that Kamala Harris is no better than Biden. He's taken to his social media platform to criticize Biden and say that the next debate with the Democratic nominee should be held on Fox News instead of ABC. And CBS News' political director, Finn Gomez, joins us now for more on the Trump team's reaction. So, Finn, how much does Biden's exit actually complicate the Trump campaign's goals?
Well, Lana, as you heard in that what you just illustrated in the intro, in that conversation that Robert Costa had with former President Trump, for them, it's all systems go. They're focusing on Vice President Harris. I spoke to some senior campaign advisors who tell me that essentially their strategy has not changed. They were preparing for this. Some of our reporting from the last couple of days indicates that they have not only some ads in preparation for Vice President Harris moving to the top of the ticket. They also have Oppo research. And they say that they've been preparing for this. During that week of that Atlanta debate, June 27th, they released an ad against Harris. And they have said, privately that they believed that this could have been a possibility, and therefore they had prepared for this possibility. And as you said, as Trump told Robert Costa, they believe that she is no better than him, and they also said that there's not much daylight on the policy positions of President Biden and Vice President Harris.
And we heard Vice President Harris in those first public remarks trying to spin that as a positive thing, talking about the legacy of accomplishment that President Biden had. I'm wondering what more you can tell us about how the Trump's campaign strategy is actually changing, because as you said, we saw how they started picking up their attacks against Vice President Harris. Do we know anything more about how things might actually change in a more substantial way?
Well, Lana, the dynamic does change, especially on some key issues. As we know, the age issue against President Biden was a significant one, even though there was only about a 3-year difference between the two. But automatically, Vice President Harris, who's 59 years old, the former president is 78 years old. So that age issue is essentially flipped. It's a bit of political jujitsu, because now Harris could, if she becomes the nominee, could target that issue against former President Trump. So that's one. Also, she's been a big voice on reproductive rights, something that she's been central for the campaign up until this point. And that's something that will be likely more pronounced. It's something that could possibly appeal to women voters, suburban voters, some perhaps independent voters in those crucial battleground states. They do feel pretty strongly, the Harris campaign feels strongly that they can make advances in those areas, also in shoring up the black vote in those crucial battleground states, as well as the Latino vote in those swing states.
All right, and we do know that Republican vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance will be holding a rally in Ohio today. Look forward to getting your take on that a little bit later. Finn Gomez, thank you.
Thank you.
And of course, it is the voters who have the final say. Up next, we're going to head over to Arizona to hear how people in that battleground state are reacting to the new potential November matchup. And then later this hour, we're going to break down the emerging shortlist of Harris's potential running mates. But as we head to break, we want to take you back over to the last time a sitting president decided not to seek his party's nomination.